I got you. Carry on. I braked at the very last minute to give you a chance to do something about the ambulance, but you weren't doing anything about the ambulance, so I had to brake for you there.
When can you be found at least partially responsible for a collision when somebody else makes the initial mistake? This video is a fantastic example of the kind of situation where that can happen. This video doesn't really have anything to do with the driving instruction that the pupil was under at the time, but it is a fantastic clip to be able to show you how you could become at least partially responsible if you continue into an obvious hazard. Before we get into the liability fully though, if you enjoy my liability reviews, do make sure to hit the follow button. So in this clip, the pupil that's under instruction by the fantastic Francis of Driving School TV is navigating a roundabout at a relatively slow pace. They're in lane 2 of the roundabout when an ambulance joins from an intermediate entrance when it strictly should be giving way to the camera car, but it joins the roundabout instead. As the camera car is at a low speed and the amount of time between the ambulance failing to give way and the near miss means that the camera car did have ample opportunity to let off the throttle and apply the brakes, as it was obvious what was happening. However, they didn't, which meant that Francis had to apply the brakes using the dual controls. It's a great example of where if you drive into an obvious hazard, you could be found at least partially responsible for a collision. And I do want to make it clear here, I'm not throwing any shade whatsoever at the pupil that's under instruction. We don't know how far along in their driving journey that they are. This isn't a video about learning to drive or driving lessons. It's just a really good example of a situation where if you continue into an obvious hazard, you could find yourself being held responsible for an impact. I also want to make it clear that I'm not saying the person that's driving the ambulance is in the clear here. They are not. They should have given way to the camera car. Their driving was not of an acceptable standard, but in this particular situation, getting close to the ambulance was avoidable, and that's what I'm trying to emphasise. We see so many dashcam clips on the internet where drivers accelerate or don't slow down and continue into obvious hazards, and if you do that, often in the disguised attempt at teaching somebody a lesson, and the worst case scenario occurs and you actually get into a collision, it should not come as a surprise if you get found partly or completely responsible for the impact. I've seen this kind of thing play out so many times with small collisions, usually at roundabouts or junctions where a car fails to give way, but with a lot of time to be able to avoid them without creating a near-miss situation. I distinctly remember a situation when I was a claim handler many moons ago. My customer sent in dashcam footage of what they believed was a no-fault collision. A car had failed to give way to them at a roundabout, however my customer in the camera car was some distance from them at this point. My customer seen them fail to give way and accelerated towards them. You seen the angle of the camera shift up as they accelerated heavily towards the car that was failing to give way. The vehicles came to a glancing blow, and as the footage was very clear in that both drivers had made obvious errors and both had contributed towards the collision, I agreed and received acceptance of an equal liability settlement with the other driver's insurance company. My customer was unhappy with that, so they decided to take the matter to small claims court themselves without any legal representation. They didn't make for a credible witness at the hearing, and I'm sure you can read between the lines as to what that means. The judge ended up throwing the book at them, and they ended up putting full liability on my customer. I will say that there's probably a whole separate video I could do on avoidable versus unavoidable, because there are a lot of videos on the internet where the comment section will hold the camera driver responsible and say that they could avoid a collision when it was actually unavoidable, and that's because people generally are a poor judge of what is avoidable and unavoidable. In road traffic collisions, we measure perception response time. Usually, accident investigators will say that the average perception response time is between 2 and 2.5 seconds. A good rule of thumb here is 1 second to acknowledge that something is happening, another second to implement avoiding action, and then you've got the time that it takes to stop from the speed that you're at on top of that. The reason that it's perception response time and not reaction time is because reaction time is the time that a human reacts to a specific stimuli that they are expecting to receive. If you've never seen the simulation recreation scene in the movie Sully, it's also very applicable to the type of people that will comment on dashcam clips. So in summary, in this clip, had it been a normal driver behind the wheel of the dash camera car and they collided with the ambulance, it is very likely that they would have been found at least partially responsible for the collision. Lovely jubbly, sound as a pound.